from the beginning.
And I was shown that that Lucifer would return, that the UN and the Vatican were going to be completely behind it, again, under false pretenses. He's going to show up and say, I'm here to save the day, right? And, okay, fine, you know.
Yeah, of course,
ahead,
you can say whatever you want. But I've always hated censorship. It's the internet.
Sometimes, you know, once they get you for your first love bite, well, it depends on how aware you are, right?
I forgot my bullets. I never had a gun. Here I am left standing. Am I the only one? For what I see, memories have gifted me. I'll never see the sun.
First of all, as you know, the Anunnaki and the Draco are enemies. Second of all, underneath Baghdad was a stargate that was created by the Anunnaki so that they could transfer from Jupiter to the Earth.
I'll never see the sun. I could just end it all, but the demons will have won.
Practitioners that, you know, some are good and some use their magic for good and to heal and to help, and others do use it for evil. And, you know, in some cases, you know, people really were
This is too much sometimes.
From the broken ruins of Babylon, this is End of Days Radio. Today's date is 11/24/17. That's November 24th, 2017. I am Daniel, your host on this amazing journey through space and time. I am broadcasting to you from the beautiful Emerald City right here in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. Welcome everybody to this post-Thanksgiving Black Friday show. While everybody else is out there stomping on each other's faces, trying to get that last Barbie doll, trying to get that last Cabbage Patch Kid, trying to get that last Tickle Me Elmo, we are here doing far more important things. We are talking about what is really going on out there. We are talking about the true nature of reality. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Cheryl Wilkinson. Cheryl Wilkinson has been looking into the mysterious disappearance and likely death of Corrie McKeague, which baffles both police and normal citizens to this very moment. Cheryl has taken part in a Reddit thread which has led to her actually being gang-stalked and harassed by a mystery element. And that is why she is here with us today, because this is End of Days Radio, and I put the message out there: if you are being stalked, if you are being gang-stalked, if you are being harassed, well, you can come on here and you can talk about it. Why am I talking so fast? Probably because I just drank a big mug of coffee. I do apologize. Anyways, shall we get on with the show? Nah. Yeah, way too much coffee. Okay, let's do this. Yep, dialing. Hello.
Hello. Oh, hi, Daniel. It's nice to talk to you.
Hello, Cheryl. I am very excited to have you here on the program today on this post-Thanksgiving show, but that doesn't really matter to you, does it? Because you're in the UK.
Yes, we're in the UK, but I know that a lot of people I follow on Facebook are putting up Thanksgiving posts, so I do know it's actually happening, yeah. So happy Thanksgiving, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Do you guys have any equivalent holiday over there? Pardon me for my lack of knowledge on the subject, but is there a holiday where you eat something in particular?
Well, I wouldn't say we have anything that's equivalent, unfortunately. I mean, I think it would be good if we did, because I think we're missing out. Because you guys seem to have so much fun over there, and we kind of don't have anything. No, I think for us, we just kind of we slowly kind of build up towards Christmas. So we have, we've got like minor kind of like celebrations and stuff going on, but we don't have anything official, unfortunately.
And I do want to get into some of these differences from the US and the UK a little bit, because this matters in terms of what we're going to be talking about today, which are people's rights and gang stalking and things of that nature.
Absolutely, yes.
And why don't we go ahead and start to get into this? I just want to go ahead and let you, Cheryl, I want to let you just tell your whole story, because that's what I know that you want to do here. So where do you feel is a good spot to start off? Should we go all the way back to the beginning of when you became aware of this particularly interesting topic?
Yes, well, my actual situation, or should I say my problems, started in February, but I wonder if for the listeners, I might want to give some background to the case itself.
Yes, absolutely. Why don't we talk about Corrie McKeague and who he was and what exactly happened to him?
Yes, well, Corrie McKeague is what's called an RAF serviceman in English speak. So he was actually he was in the RAF, the Royal Air Force, and when he disappeared, he was 23 years old. He was last seen on the 24th of September 2016 on CCTV, so on closed circuit television. In the early hours of the morning in a town called Bury St Edmunds, which is in the south of England. He was stationed at a Royal Air Force base in Honington, which is in Suffolk. So he was roughly 10 miles from the area where he disappeared. He went out with his friends that night. He was drinking in the town of Bury St Edmunds. And around about, well, the last reported sighting that we have of Corrie McKeague is on CCTV at around 3:20 in the morning. When he went into, he walked into an area known as the Horseshoe, which is really just a piece of ground behind some shops. He's seen on CCTV walking into the area, and unfortunately, he's not seen coming out. So the common perception is that he just literally walked into that area and disappeared. There are a number of theories about what happened to him, and issues about whether his disappearance he could have gone AWOL, which is absent without leave, and it was perhaps a staged disappearance. And there's also a suggestion that he attempted to walk home, and he wasn't caught on CCTV, so the CCTV missed him as he was walking out of the area and had an accident, because this is a very rural area. There's lots of fields and trees, and it's very much in the countryside. So there was a possibility that as he attempted to walk back from Bury St Edmunds to his base at RAF Honington, he had an accident, and it was a case of misadventure. And there's another theory, which is that he possibly could have met someone in that area behind those shops, the area known as the Horseshoe, and got into a car with someone either willingly or unwillingly, and was driven away. And unfortunately, he could possibly be dead. So at the moment, I think there's a general consensus that people don't expect to find him alive. But there is a search going on at the moment at what's called a landfill site, which is where us English people dump our rubbish. Or garbage, as you would say. So the search has been continuing I think it's been going on for about 4 weeks now, and I think the search is going to be extended. And at this point, obviously that they are looking, well, there won't be very much left, how to put this discreetly, there won't be very much left of a body, so they're looking for traces of him, or I would assume DNA evidence that he was actually deposited in this landfill site.
And this is a really big area. It's not easy to search an entire landfill in just a few days. They really got to pick through a lot of garbage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have been several searches so far. There was a previous search in the same site, which because obviously there are so many players in this story, so many different agencies, but Suffolk Police, or Suffolk Constabulary as they are called formally, started a search several months ago, and then they abruptly stopped the search without locating a body. And their position at the time was that they believed he was unfortunately deceased and buried in the landfill site, but they weren't able to continue with the search because, as you might know, it's already cost over £1 million to the entire investigation, and the search costs a lot of money as well. So they stopped the search, and then there was a campaign for them to restart the search, obviously by Mr. McKeague's family and supporters of the family, and they were successful to an extent with that, and the search is now going ahead again. But there has actually been the role of Suffolk Police in the investigation of Mr. McKeague's disappearance has been questioned extensively by the public. Not so much by the press, I should say, but there's been a lot of criticism of Suffolk Police, and they've now, after a review by another police force, which is, I believe, East Midlands Police, an independent review of the competence of Suffolk Police. The review found that the police were competent in the investigation, but I think the review advised that they needed to restart the search of this landfill area, which is just a massive task.
And it's my understanding that the reason why they think Corey's body might be in the landfill is because there were, what do you guys call them over there? Lorries, the garbage trucks?
Yeah. I was wondering how I was going to phrase that. Yeah, we would call that a bin lorry. Which you would probably call it a garbage truck, but yes, it's or perhaps we could just say rubbish lorry, but it's simply just a bin lorry. Yeah. There was a suggestion that Mr. McKeague was drunk that night. He had actually there was a few stops before he ended up in the horseshoe area behind the shops. He had been into several pubs that night, and there was a suggestion that he might have kind of ended up being quite drunk, stumbled into the horseshoe area, possibly because he was incoherent, or he was just looking for somewhere else to sleep, which seems like a crazy idea, and had accidentally climbed into a rubbish bin and fallen asleep in the bin, and the rubbish lorry had then, a few minutes later, gone into the area and picked up the bin, obviously without knowing he was inside the bin, taken him to the landfill and deposited his body with the rubbish into the landfill. Now, that seems a rather, incredulous suggestion. I don't think for one moment that's true. However, I don't know if you watched any of the police conferences, but I actually watched a conference just a few months ago where Detective Inspector Katie Elliott, who's running this investigation, actually there was a whole kind of spiel that she came out with about the fact that he was known to sleep in rubbish and he was known to sleep on park benches, and she believed that he could have actually attempted to sleep inside a rubbish bin. And I mean, it's completely bizarre. It's the most surreal, bizarre police conference I've ever seen, to be quite honest.
Well, that seems like a strange accusation to make towards somebody that somebody has a habit of falling asleep on rubbish or garbage bins. Was that substantiated by any evidence?
It was so strange, Daniel. I mean, as I say, it was surreal. In fact, I mean, if the situation wasn't so serious, it would be funny. But no. But she said she was asked that question, and she said that it had been substantiated by a friend of Mr. McKeague that this is something he did. Now, I just find. I mean, many people have also said that they find it quite bizarre. When I actually wrote my post about on Reddit about the situation with the disappearance of Corrie McKeague, I wasn't particularly complimentary to Mr. McKeague because I did believe at the time he might have been drunk. However, and by extension possibly responsible for his own disappearance in a case of misadventure. However, this thing about sleeping in rubbish bins, I think if I look at the press coverage where this started, Mr. McKeague's mother, Nicola Urquhart, appeared in a press conference in the very early stages of the disappearance, one of the first police conferences, and she was asked about Miss McKeague sleeping in a doorway, and she responded, "Well, yes, we know that if he's very tired, he might just fall asleep wherever it might be. So we know it's possible that he would perhaps sleep in a doorway, or he might sleep on a park bench or something like that." But I don't think. I think in a sense, she was probably too honest, and this has now been used against her by Suffolk Police, who have attempted to, in their efforts to, what I believe, cover up the real circumstances of the disappearance. They've attempted to pass this to suggest that this is misadventure, and they've used, as I say, they've used her words against her. And came up with this whole narrative about the rubbish bin, about him sleeping in the bin.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty drunk in my lifetime, and I don't think I've ever been drunk enough to climb inside of a garbage bin.
No, I just find it completely bizarre. And if we look at what he was wearing that night, he seems to be someone who's very concerned about his appearance. He was wearing very nice, expensive clothes. I mean, I don't personally, when I watch the CCTV, I don't believe he's that drunk or he's exceptionally drunk. But I mean, I mean, as I say, I don't really know, but it's just the most bizarre. I mean, you can't, for an investigation which has such a high profile, which is now internationally, people read about it in various different countries. I'm sure now you've actually heard about it in the States as well. For a police force to give a press conference and come out with that kind of statement is just completely, it's just beyond strange.
It's also my understanding, based on what little I read about it after you contacted me, I wasn't aware of the case, but I also read that his car wasn't even that far away and he could have just walked there.
That's right. That's right, Daniel. The narrative, the conventional narrative that we have from the from the police and to an extent from Mr. McKeague's family is that he was he was that night he was at his base in RAF Honington in his quarters with all of his friends from the RAF. And they decided to go out that night, but unfortunately, Mr. McKeague was accidentally left behind because they left in two cars, and each car thought that he was in the other car. So he drove himself into town that night, parked his car in town, and it was literally, yes, I mean, you're quite right. It was literally about 10 minutes around the corner from the doorway where he fell asleep. Now, that's if you believe that he actually did drive his car into town that night. If you believe that he actually knew his car was there.
Yeah, that's true. It does seem like there are some people on the internet that they seem very angry at the family for pushing the investigation so much. They seem to be kind of irate about that.
Well, I mean, I will confess to you, Daniel, that I was most definitely one of those people. When I started my Reddit thread, I just felt that there are hundreds of people who disappear every year under mysterious circumstances, and there was actually the case of a young man several years ago called Luke Durbin. Now, Luke Durbin disappeared from a night out under kind of similar circumstances, really, from a nightclub. And unfortunately, the family of Luke Durbin had very little support from the police. There was very little press. There certainly wasn't a £50,000 campaign to raise money to search for Luke Durbin. In fact, he was completely forgotten. And as I say, he has been for years. So I just felt that I felt part of the reason for the if you like, the family's insistence on getting support from the police and drumming up support from the public was based around the idea of, well, the fact that Mr. McKeague is a military serviceman, and Mr. McKeague comes from a military family. And I think that the sense of entitlement was generated around that. And you know, to an extent, one of the things I wrote on Reddit is that I felt Mr. McKeague had become an internet meme. You know, we saw photos of Mr. McKeague appeared in his uniform, and then it was all this kind of like, let's find let's find Corrie, which is fair enough. I mean, obviously, let's find him, but the military angle, in the sense that one person is perhaps more deserving than another because of that, was quite annoying to me, if you know what I mean.
And Cheryl, you're not somebody that, well, this is my impression anyways, you're not somebody that would be considered a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. You're just kind of a normal everyday person, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely not. I certainly don't subscribe to well, I did previously, shall we say. I would have laughed about some of the stuff that I've experienced. I would have thought it was completely impossible. I mean, I'm not someone who goes around, posting on conspiracy threads or anything like that. I know Reddit does have a slight reputation as being, going into the conspiracy angle on some of the subs, but my post was actually appeared in Unresolved Mysteries, so it was just really on the basis of a crime, So certainly crimes and crime research and looking at forensic imagery, that kind of thing, is something that's very interesting to me. But I wouldn't look at it. I certainly wasn't looking at it initially from the angle of a conspiracy. Or I certainly wasn't looking at it from the angle of a cover-up as well. I was just all I saw initially was an entitled family who believed that their child was worth finding, perhaps more than anyone else's child. And I just felt that there was something a bit unsavory about that, or a little bit unfair, considering the resources that were put into the investigation, which, as I say, those resources are now over £1 million in the last year.
And is there a possibility that Corey might have been involved with some unscrupulous, shady types? Perhaps was he going into this area, the Horseshoe, to make a drug deal or meet with somebody? Is there any possibility of that?
Well, I could talk endlessly about some of the supposition and some of the suggestions that have been based around his private life. Because if I go into another area, then I would end up talking about Reddit, and I would go off on a tangent, which I want to talk about Reddit, but slightly later. Yes. There's a suggestion that he may have gone into the Horseshoe to score drugs. He may have gone to the Horseshoe for a sexual encounter using one of the dating apps that he had on his phone. Yes, I think there has been a lot of questions asked. Well, over the last several months, in connection to his public image and the military hero meme that was becoming widespread on the internet and on Twitter was tarnished a little bit by some of the revelations that came out about Mr. McKeague I would say in February and in March.
It's my understanding that there was some past history of dating apps. I mean, a lot of people use them nowadays. Even I've gone on them just for giggles.
Oh yeah. Yes. Okay, well, to talk about the dating apps, the revelations came out in over a number of weeks. I think it was known that Mr. McKeague used, I think it was Plenty of Fish and Tinder or something like that. I don't actually use them myself, so but I'm fairly unshockable. So So I mean, obviously he's a young guy. He's 23. He was the public assumed single. So yeah, I mean, it would make sense to me that he would use dating apps, and obviously whatever kind of sexual encounters he might have would have been, his private business. But people felt that through his use of dating websites, he may have put himself at risk or encountered someone from one of those websites who could be responsible for his disappearance. There was also, and I'm going to talk about this in more detail later, but there's also a nightclub, and it was one of the in fact, it was the last nightclub that Mr. McKeague visited that night, called Flex, which has quite I've heard that there's a gay scene going on with Flex, and there's quite a lot of unsavory characters, not because of the gay scene, but because of the drugs and the violence in that club. So it has quite a bad reputation, and there is a theory, I think, which is being pushed by members of Mr. McKeague's family, and certainly the intelligence agency which is working for the family. There's a theory that people, staff, and perhaps some of the shall we say clients in Flex nightclub were partly responsible for his disappearance.
What is the story there? Why do they think that there's a connection to the Flex nightclub?
Okay, to talk about the connection to Flex nightclub, we have to talk about Reddit, because this is where all the information was leaked. Information was leaked on Reddit, and it was actually leaked on a subreddit called Chasing Corrie McKeague, which I created as a member of the public, because the original post was on the Unresolved Mysteries thread. So it was a post on a thread which had about 2,000 comments, and it was getting, the thread was getting very long, and people were saying, "Oh, the thread's going to break," and there's a massive amount of attention. So I created a subreddit to move the traffic away from that original Reddit. Now, on the subreddit, that's where we had interference from the intelligence service, and that's where things started to get very, very difficult. And I think that's where all the problems came from. But on the subreddit...
Okay, now we're getting into the rabbit hole a little bit.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you have to keep me on track, Daniel. Yeah, yes, we'd have to keep me on track, because I haven't actually gone through all the details that I want to talk about. But after the original post, the subreddit was created in late December, early January, and with certain individuals joined that subreddit with, I think, information that wouldn't be accessible just to members of the public. They had information relating to names, addresses, phone numbers, car license plate numbers, and businesses owned by people involved with Flex nightclub, and that information was being made available to the public, as well as accusations with the names and addresses of some of the individuals that they thought had contributed to Mr. McKeague's disappearance. Not, I should say, that these people were actually involved with his with his death in any way, but they had been involved with covering up what happened to him, perhaps disposing of a body.
Wow, this is getting very, very disturbing indeed. It almost seems like this element came in and began manipulating the scenario and planting little seeds, and they seem to be doing it with some sort of intelligence based on the way you're describing, some extreme intelligence and planning.
I think, as I say, there's so many players in this that it's very easy to get off track. So I'll give you some background to the individuals who became involved in Reddit. As you know, there's a Facebook group which is set up by Corrie McKeague's family, and it's called Find Cory. And it's the group was set up for people to perhaps provide the family with information about any sightings of Mr. McKeague or any background details, people who might have spoken to him that night, or people who might know anything about what happened to him. So, I mean, it had very valid reasons for being set up, because there are for missing people, there's always a Facebook page and there's always a Facebook group. So I think it was a valid thing to do. And at the time, because remember, this is still just a missing person case. It's not a criminal investigation. It's not a murder inquiry. So at the time, the police I would say, maybe in October, November last year, the police weren't doing very much, and the family set up their own helpline and asked the public to contact their helpline rather than contacting the police with any information about Mr. McKeague. So there was a reward of £50,000, which was raised by the public, and there was also money raised to search the rural countryside areas near where Mr. McKeague disappeared. So there was this Facebook group. Now, what happened was Mr. McKeague's uncle, Tony Ringe, is I think he's a retired intelligence officer with the British Army. I mean, this is not fiction. This stuff is real. And Mr. Ringe decided that he would like to get some of his ex-veteran army buddies to come and work as consultants in the search for Corrie McKeague. So he employed, with the public's funding, with public donations, he contracted an organisation called Mackenzie Intelligence Services, and Mackenzie is a friend of Mr. Ringe, probably going back a number of years, who has experience in Bosnia and Iraq, working for the British Army, I believe as an intelligence officer. And the role of Mackenzie Intelligence Services was to, shall we say, scour social media looking for information on McKeague. So any information, any tips that came through to the Facebook group, their intention, because they specialize in data collation and data analysis using internet sources. So their specialism was to actually go through, I would imagine, all the internet postings on Facebook that had been made about Mr. McKeague, looking for information that they could then pass on to the police. So that was their role. But what they did was they also, rather than just using Facebook, they also infiltrated every other internet website that you can think of that might be discussing the case, and turned and twisted the narrative into a situation where they could then start leaking information about individuals that they felt were implicated in his disappearance. And and bear in mind that they were paid to do this with public funding.
Okay, so these guys that were doing this, they were trying to find Corrie? Well, the thing is, Daniel, I think that I believe that Mr. McKeague's family and people close to the investigation do know what happened to him, and they know the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. I believe that they know why he disappeared and who was responsible for it. Now, the thing is, knowing that, what they wanted to do was then to pressurize the police to start an investigation into those individuals, because at the moment they don't have a body, and that's the big problem. Without having the body, it's very difficult to prove that this is anything other than a missing person investigation, although obviously he has been missing for a long time now, for longer than 12 months. So the intention of the individuals on Reddit working for Mackenzie Intelligence Service, which is paid for by public donations, was to start to leak information to the public and to the press as well, because the press is a very important aspect in this story. They were starting to leak information, as I say, names and addresses, locations, dates and times of individuals they thought were involved in his disappearance, with the view to making the police aware that they know this. The police know this too, and they're going to tell the public. And obviously by doing that, it exerts a tremendous amount of pressure on the police to actually get a move on and start, chasing down these people and start doing something about it. Oh wow, this is just getting ever more complex. My God.
Oh, I quite honestly, Daniel, I have about 50 pages of notes of things that I've deduced and worked out over the last 8 months to trying to understand what on earth happened. Um, and yes, I mean it's well, there's much more to it. This is just the start, really. I mean, there's much more to it than that. But this is when you're asking about Reddit and you're asking who are these people. I can tell you that there are people who have information that would not be known by the public. I don't think, we talk about web sleuths, and I mean, I saw Reddit as just perhaps a more intelligent version of web sleuths, really, where you could talk about theories and you talk about, but in that sense, what you were talking about was information which had already appeared in mainstream media. So, for example, if you saw a TV report or you read a news report or a case update, something like that, you could talk about that on Reddit. But information that was coming out on the Chasing Corrie McKeague sub had not been released in mainstream media. It was information that wasn't known to anyone. And once it was released or it was put onto once it appeared on those Reddit threads, then it would start to appear in the press. So the press colluded, I think, to a large extent with the intelligence services that were working for the family, because it's information, it's news, it's a very hot topic in the press. People want to read about it, and anything that they could get from the family and anything they could publish, then they would just eat that stuff up,
So what was it that they were leaking about this Flex nightclub?
Okay. There's a lot of. I would have to say that the subreddit Chasing Corrie McKeague was actually it's a private Reddit now. It's gone private, and it was a lot of the threads have been removed. You can't find that information. You couldn't go back and access it.
Removed by who? By Reddit?
Well, no, because what happened is, as I say, I set up the subreddit, but after about a week, I was locked out of the subreddit, and my internet was hacked, and my password, obviously my Reddit password, was changed, so I couldn't get back into it. And the individuals who had joined the subreddit, they then took over as admins, and they started leaking information to other individuals on the subreddit who represented the kind of like the tabloid press, if you like.
Oh my God.
Okay, so I can get, as an example, I know that it was suggested that Mr. McKeague had some involvement with people from Flex nightclub, and that some of these people had been in the horseshoe area on the night he disappeared, because this is the very last place that he visited before he went to buy some food. He fell asleep in a doorway, and then he went into the horseshoe area. So the last club where he was seen is Flex nightclub. So as I say, there are some very unsavory characters who are associated with that. So the information that came out was the names and addresses of those people, a suggested scenario of their involvement, which is, I believe, that they were involved with disposing of a body, not that they were actually involved with his death, but that they covered up and protected individuals who were involved with his death.
So I take it there's a theory that there was some kind of maybe drug trafficking or just some sort of bad feelings in the nightclub, in the between the employees that work there and probably some of the customers, a scenario, something like that.
That's what. Well, yeah, that is one scenario, but I don't think that's what happened. Information was given to me, but again, when I talk to you about this from a legal point of view, all I can talk about is speculation, because I don't have evidence at all. But things were said to me, which I think, quite honestly, I think some of the information that was said to me put me at risk to an extent, because I can't now go back and pretend that I haven't heard it or I didn't read it. It's information sent to me in private messages. But as I say, I couldn't prove it, so all I can talk to you about is speculation that was passed on to me. So it's, in a sense, it's gossip and it's rumors, but I do think there's a lot of truth in this. I'll talk to you about an example of what was leaked to the tabloid press. Round about, I think it would have been January. I think it was January the 8th, or no, it was the 6th. Sorry, 6th of January, I think. And there was a post made on one of the Reddit threads. I think it was the thread that in the Unsolved Mysteries thread. Someone appeared on Reddit with a link to some screenshots. It was actually linked to a website, and it was a website that featured Corrie McKeague's profile. And the website was called Fab Swingers. Okay, that's swingers. And the post was deleted very soon after it was made, but it basically said that Mr. McKeague was involved with this swinging website where he was meeting people for bisexual bondage, S&M activities, pretty much anything you can think of. Mr. McKeague was interested in. And it was really kind of moving up a level from, like Tinder and Plenty of Fish. It was he had some very specialized sexual interests, shall we say. So these, as I say, there was a link to the website. At the time, this was not known to anyone in the public. This was not known I don't believe it was known to the press. But the link appeared to this, as I say, the Fab Swingers website, where you could see the profile. And at first when I saw it, is it legitimate? I thought, is there any way to verify it? I thought it was a hoax. I thought it was some kind of joke. I didn't go and look at the website, but other people who were present on Reddit when the links were posted did. And it was legitimate. It was actually his profile on this swinging website. So what happened is the next day it appeared in the Daily Mail, and it appeared all over the British press, with credit to an anonymous source on Reddit who had leaked this information about Mr. McKeague's, shall we say, sexual involvement. Now, what happened is, after that, obviously, Mr. McKeague's family had to come out and say that they were actually aware of his links to this website, but they hadn't. They didn't feel it was. They hadn't felt it was relevant to tell the public about this because it was his own private business. However, a number of people were quite annoyed because they felt that they hadn't been told the full truth about Mr. McKeague's private life. And they felt some people felt that Corrie's involvement with Fab Swingers could have put him at risk of an encounter with someone who could have caused his death.
Yeah, that seems like it should be one of the main things that's brought up from the beginning.
Absolutely, but you see, it wasn't. It was known to his family, and it was later found out that his family had actually been accessing his Fab Swingers account and keeping the account open rather than deleting it, because they I think at that point they were trying to find background information on people he was communicating with on the Fab Swingers website. Now, that website, in my opinion, is absolutely crucial to the investigation. And I know you mentioned, Daniel, about perhaps an argument in Flex nightclub being, or some disagreement with the staff being the reason for his what I now think is his death. But I believe that it was his connection to this Fab Swingers website that was implicated, that was the cause, shall we say, for what happened to him, most definitely. And the website, it gets even more complicated because, as I said, this information, the links to the website were leaked on the Reddit thread that I created. And then the next day they appeared in the Daily. I mean, you can Google it. It's all over the Daily Mail. It's all over the Sun. It was actually in the Guardian. That's how prolific this investigation became. There was a tremendous amount of media interest in the case after it was found out that Mr. McKeague was, inverted commas, was a swinger, shall we say.
Yeah, I can only imagine how much danger an individual would be putting themselves in, engaging in any sort of hookups with people that they don't know, especially putting yourself in a vulnerable position, getting involved with the bondage activities and things like that. That seems like a tremendously bad thing to do, considering there are people that are sadists and people that are murderers and people like that out there.
Yes, yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Daniel. And we had, I think there was a lot of press attention on this as well, because there was a case, I think it was last year, of a guy called Stephen Port, who is known in the press as the grinder killer, because he met most of his victims on an app called Grindr. Obviously, he was gay. And I think about 4 or 5 gay guys ended up dead directly through encounters with Stephen Port, which occurred directly because of the Grindr app. So I think when they heard about the Fab Swingers website, they thought, oh right, it just seemed a logical conclusion to draw that he'd obviously met someone or had been involved with someone on that website. Perhaps that night had gone into the horseshoe area and had prearranged a meeting with someone, had been picked up in a car, driven out of the area, had then become involved in a sex act which had gone wrong, and subsequently he died. And I think that was the reaction that the public had when this all this press attention about Fab Swingers came out. Personally, I don't think that's what happened.
What do you personally feel happened?
Okay. Well, again, this is all supposition, but I can only talk about messages that were sent to me on social media. Again, I have no way to verify who sent those messages because, as you know, Reddit is anonymous, so I couldn't back up any of this. But I do think there was the intelligence agencies were working on Reddit. I believe, and I mean, you can actually you can Google, you can search this stuff out on the internet. I can certainly send you the links if you're interested, because I'm not the only person who has who has this theory. It was published in blogs, and it has been stated previously. But it was suggested to me that Mr. McKeague had been involved in an incident, but not on the night he disappeared. He had been involved in an incident several weeks before he disappeared, which was, I believe, shall we say, a sexual scenario where something had gone wrong. Now, it's possible that someone was injured or harmed, or something happened to a person that Mr. McKeague was involved with, perhaps involved with another group of people. So not just Mr. McKeague on his own, but he was present, shall we say. He may not have been the person who caused any harm or injury, but he was present when something went wrong several weeks before he disappeared. And I think that the person he was involved with was someone from Fab Swingers, but it wasn't. None of the things that happened to him that night really, on the night he disappeared, are the things that contribute to his disappearance. It's what he did several weeks before he disappeared that caused his disappearance.
So basically, Corey had met some strange people through the app, and these people were possibly involved in some kind of ritualistic bondage or something, where maybe they got too hurt and they died, or is that kind of the idea?
I think the idea is, I mean, I can't say because obviously we don't have any deaths reported in the area at that time, so I don't think anyone died, but perhaps someone was incredibly humiliated or seriously injured, not to the point of death, but something, shall we just say something bad happened to someone. And Mr. McKeague, I'm not saying he caused that to happen, but I'm saying he would know about that, or he was present when he was there. He was present with a group of people when that happened. Now, my theory is, and this is something that I kind of worked out myself, and I think it put me at some level of risk. But are you familiar with the search for Mr. McKeague's mobile phone?
Yeah, I was actually planning
Yeah.
to bring that up with you because it's my understanding that the cell phone data shows that the phone moved on the same path as the garbage lorry. Do I have that correct?
Yes, you do. Yes. So the idea was that the phone, Corrie was lost, missing, and so is Corrie's phone. The idea is, yeah, that the pings from his mobile phone triangulated with the route taken by the bin lorry. So the assumption was that the phone was in the bin lorry, and therefore Corrie was with the phone and also in the bin lorry. But I don't actually think think he was in the bin lorry. But there's been a lot of attention on finding his mobile phone. Now, as I mentioned to you, the intelligence company, or the intelligence consultancy employed by Mr. McKeague's family, are specialists in data analysis and telecommunications with using military-grade software. Now, I think they are currently looking for that phone because that phone was never found. It's still missing. And I think that the attention that's been given to the phone and certainly a number of the searches, I think they've been looking for Corrie McKeague, but I also think they've been looking for Corrie McKeague's mobile phone, because I think that the incident that Mr. McKeague was involved in, again, this is entirely supposition, but I think there is some sort of visual record of that incident. There's either video or photographs, or there's some kind of documentation of what happened in that incident, as I say, several weeks prior to his disappearance. And that documentation is on the mobile phone. That's why if you look at some of the YouTube videos with Corrie's uncle Tony Ringe, and he talks about trying to find where the phone moved that night before Corrie disappeared, the night that he disappeared, because there's a suggestion that Corrie didn't have his phone with him. Initially, it was thought that he did, because it was thought that he was sleeping in a doorway, and it was believed that he sent a photograph or an image to someone at 3 a.m. in the morning. However, later, Corrie's mother, Nicola Urquhart, said that she doesn't believe his phone was with him at all when he was in the doorway. He didn't have his phone. So I would then ask, who had his phone and why? And why is there so much interest in finding out who had his phone that night? Because I believe that phone was taken and passed around, and I don't think it was in his possession when he disappeared.
Well, when I first heard about this story, one thing that came to mind, as you know, this show, it's very hardcore conspiracy orientated.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that there could possibly be underground rings of some very perverse people, types of people that are involved in Satanism and things like that. And these organizations and these groups, they do seem to be very tightly linked to powerful people. Especially, it seems like a lot of this stuff comes from the UK.
Yes. Do you mean the sort of the gang stalking aspect or the military aspect of it?
Well, it seems to me that the gang stalking and the military stuff, it very well might be connected in itself, right?
Absolutely, I think, yeah, absolutely. I've had to try to sort of separate the story of Corrie McKeague from my story in a sense. So what I've done is kind of given all the background, most of the background details on his disappearance and on my thoughts about what happened to him. And I can only say that finding out information about him and being involved with Reddit is, it's my conclusion that's what's caused me to have so many problems at the moment.
Yes, and I've heard similar stories of people poking their nose, not to say that anybody's poking their nose, but, sticking their nose into things that somehow land them in a position where they know what they shouldn't, suddenly they're getting this harassment. It sounds like that's what's been happening to you. And first of all, thank you for coming on this program. I do put the message out there that victims of gang stalking, please contact me. I'd like to talk to you and bring you on here. But how did this start? What happened, Cheryl? Can we get into this horrible thing that's been happening to you?
Yes, yeah. I became concerned about my involvement with Reddit when all this information was leaked about it, with individuals' names, addresses, phone numbers, that kind of thing, because I wasn't very happy with that. But I got locked out of Reddit anyway after about a week of setting up the Chasing Corrie McKeague stuff. My account was hacked. I think it would have been maybe a couple of weeks after that, my internet was hacked. My home phone was monitored. I was followed and photographed to the point where I actually, when I noticed there was something wrong with my internet, and it's not just like that. I think it was hacked through my iCloud account. It's not just that there was something wrong with it. It was like drastically wrong. I couldn't access it. I was accessing web pages that didn't exist because some software was put on my router, which redirected the IP addresses to bogus websites, which were actually giving out details about the McKeague case, but they weren't, like real valid websites. I noticed that there was like a strange beeping noise that was, it was happening in the kitchen. It was happening in the bedroom. Initially I thought, wow, what's happened? Because this is so unusual. I contacted the police, which I believe is what you would do, because I thought, well, I've got all my bank details are connected to my iCloud account. Obviously there could be some fraud or something, but I also felt that there was a possibility it was connected to Reddit, because some of the information or some of the stuff I've been typing on my iPad in notes was known to individuals on the Corrie McKeague subreddit, and I thought, how could they possibly know that unless they had remote access to my iPad? I disconnected the internet and I tried to use like a cellular service. I bought like a mobile device that gives you mobile internet, because I thought the problem was my router. However, I tried to access the internet, or I tried to access a cellular service on 3 or 4 different phones, using SIM cards from different providers, and I could not get access to the internet. It was like the signal was jammed on all the devices. I picked up my home phone, tried to make a call, and there was a delay in dialing out. There was a beeping noise on the phone, and then there was a delay, so I couldn't actually, I could dial out, but I was very aware of the presence of someone listening in on the other side of the phone. So I thought, well, there's something really wrong. And at the time, I thought, perhaps I was quite naive at the time, and I thought, well, I must be under some kind of surveillance. And I phoned the police, and I just explained to them. I said I've been involved in a website called Reddit, and the fact is that the thing I've been involved with does. It may have interfered with an investigation into a missing person. It's an ongoing investigation, and I think that someone has accessed my iPad and my mobile devices and to find out if I have any information or something like that. And they said, well, maybe they just. This is the bizarre thing. It was I dialed a police, just out. I think it's 101 in this country. It's just for like non-emergencies, and I spoke to a police officer, and he told me, well, maybe they just want to find out what's on your devices. And I thought, what? I thought so. I was led to believe by this police officer I spoke to that I was actually. It was a kind of confirmation that yes, there was some kind of surveillance going on. And he said, but if you don't have anything on your devices, you don't have to worry about it. And I thought, well, of course I don't have any information. I kind of thought, well, okay, maybe they just want to look through my stuff and then they'll just like leave me alone or something. Then things got worse, and I was going out of the house. I was getting a bus into town, and I noticed a number of people who looked out of place at the bus stop. they would get on the same bus that I got on, because I lived in that area for a number of years, and I know the locals. I know the neighbours, I know who lives there, and they were completely out of place. I would get on the bus and I'd get off the bus, and they would be following me. That I could see that they were behind me. I went into Starbucks, and on several different occasions I had people sitting next to me, even though there's like lots of empty seats and empty tables. They would come and sit at my table right next to me, and they just look over my shoulder at whatever I was doing on my phone. I had people also in Starbucks picking up their iPhones, taking photographs of me. I'd leave Starbucks, I'd walk down the street, somebody else would be. It's almost like a relay race, Walk past someone else, they'd step out, take another photo. A little bit further down, someone else, there's another photo, and this would go on all the way down the street. I had we had also where we live. It's not a very affluent area, so it's not the kind of area where you would see expensive cars. You'd see old cars, or maybe like no cars really. However, I started to see a lot of white SUV vehicles, very expensive cars with tinted windows, and always white for some reason, which I thought was strange. And there would be 3 or 4 parked outside, either outside my house or out on the road, because we live on a busy road. So they'd be parked on the road opposite, kind of like directly opposite. And I thought, well, this is weird, because I don't know who owns, I didn't know who actually owned the cars because they were so out of place. I walked down the street, and then I looked in some alleyways as I walked down the road, and I saw more cars, and then a little bit further on, there's some more white SUV cars, and I just thought, what the hell, it was everything. It's like everything is very incongruous. Everything looks out of place, if you understand what I mean. I think that's the early stages of the kind of psychological disruption campaign that's been going on since February, is to actually make you feel very disorientated, and it's almost like they want you to know that things are not right.
It's definitely a form of bullying, really, that it seems to amp up as time goes on.
Yes, Daniel, that's right. It got much worse though, because as I say, I made an original phone call to the police, and I phoned them in, I think it was the middle of January, and it's still continued. And I thought, as I say, they said to me on the phone, if you have any problems, just come into the police station and talk about it. And I thought, well, that sounded, like a reasonable thing to say. So I thought, well, maybe I'm just under some kind of weird surveillance and the police are involved in it. And but I don't understand why I'm being photographed in the street, because they obviously know what I look like, because they've got all my documents, right? Because they've accessed them through my internet, through my iPad, including my passport. So they obviously know who I am. Eventually, after I'd been photographed and followed, it was starting to wear me down quite a lot. So I went into the police station. I had the name of the police officer I spoke to. I asked to speak to the police officer. They said, "Oh, hold on a second," and I had to wait for about maybe 20 minutes. They said, "We'll get someone to come and see you." So I waited, and 2 police officers came out of the office, and they took me into a private room. At the time, I had written a letter, which was more of a statement, really, just to say that I had no information on the disappearance of Corrie McKeague. Certainly, if I did, I would have passed it on to the police, and that I'm not, I have no involvement in the case. So I really wanted to make people aware of that, because I was hoping that they would just stop, accessing my internet and my home phone and following me as well. And I was in there for about 40 minutes. I was asked about, I said, I have actually spoken to the police, and I've been told that my internet is under surveillance and I've been followed. And now you have to bear in mind, and I think what happened to me is just a classic scenario, really. But I am a person who has no previous mental health issues. I've worked in education as a teacher for quite a long time. I've actually got what's called in England, it's called an enhanced criminal disclosure, which means that you have like a security police check so that you can work with young people. You have to, because it's a legal requirement. So I've been mentally stable for all of my life. I've never had in fact, until that day that I went into the police station, I had never actually been to a police station. I'd never needed, I'd never needed to go to a police station. And what happened to me was unbelievable. They questioned my mental health. They asked me if I took tablets. I have a muscle nerve problem, and I take one tablet at night for that muscle nerve problem. But they said, have you taken too many tablets? Because you sound a little bit unbalanced. You sound a little bit unstable. Are you sure that, do you have any mental health problems? And of course, I've kept saying, no, I don't have any mental health problems. And no, I haven't taken too many tablets. And this whole thing went on and on and on. And 40 minutes later, they stood. Now, you have to remember, I went to the police station on my own. So I was completely alone in the room with these two police officers. I was sitting down, and they stood up, and they kind of like walked towards me, and they put their arms out, and they said, we're going to have to take you to hospital. And I said, what? I said, well, I don't need to go to hospital. They said, well, we think you might have taken too many tablets. I said, well, that's ridiculous because I'm perfectly coherent, logical, rational. How could I have taken too many tablets? Anyway, I realized that they weren't going to, there was no way I was going to be able to walk out of that police station and go home. And I just thought how, I couldn't, it was incredulous.
And you had walked into there voluntarily.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they hadn't asked me to go there. I'd gone there to report that there was interference with my internet, and I was being followed in the street.
And somehow you go in there voluntarily, and suddenly they're taking control of your persons. That's crazy.
It's crazy, but I can tell you, Daniel, and I have not said this previously to anyone, but there is a recording of that interview. I had the presence of mind when I went to the police station to actually make a recording of that on my iPhone.
Oh, can you play that for us?
Yeah. Well, no, because it's about an hour and a half. Well, it's about an hour long, and there's lots of gaps, and there's lots of. It needs to be edited. But I was so terrified that for months and months and months, I wasn't even able to tell anyone that I had recorded it. I was so terrified about what could potentially happen to me or what could happen to the recording. So anyway, as I say, I was in, and they said, we're going to have to take you to hospital. And I realized there was nothing I could do. I realized that they were not going to let me just leave the police station. They were going to. I just thought, well, why are they taking me to hospital? Because I was in the recording. If you listen to it, I'm quite stressed because I've been followed and photographed for the last 2 or 3 weeks and harassed. So I am very stressed, and I am talking quite quickly. And I'm trying, but at the same time, I would say that someone who has taken a number of tablets would not be able to talk quickly or would not be able to talk coherently in the way that I do on that recording. And that's why anyone who listens to it will say, well, that person, obviously that person hasn't taken tablets. They sound perfectly normal. If you think about the level of overdose or something, or the way you might be in a state of total, being totally incoherent. I mean, I'm sure someone who's overdosed on tablets could not maintain a logical conversation for 40 minutes.
It's basically the same narrative that they were throwing on Corey. Oh, he was so drunk, and now they're doing the same thing to you.
Possibly, yes, possibly, yeah.
Same tactic.
They asked me. Yeah. During the interview, they asked me if I knew anything about the McKeague case, and I said, of course I don't. But I said I suspect that individuals I've been involved with on Reddit have accessed my internet because they seem to know that they have information about what I've been typing on my iPad, which could only be gained if they had remote access to my iPad or that they had cloned my iPad with another device, which is more than possible. I mean, certainly it's very easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's very possible to do that if you have military-grade intelligence software of the type of software that Mackenzie Intelligence Services has. So it was logical for me to assume that they were responsible for it at the time. So anyway, but the police, as I say, they ended up taking me to hospital. I had to wait in the hospital. I had to have a psychological assessment while I was there. I had to have some form of blood test, which I didn't really want to have. I had to have an ECG, which I didn't understand why I was having that. But it should have been obvious to anyone in the hospital that I was not someone who had taken an overdose because I was as rational that day as I am today, as I'm talking to you at the moment. I sound exactly like that. And there's no way that I could have taken an overdose. But anyway, they went through this whole procedure. And eventually I saw a doctor, and he said, why are you here? You know, what are you doing here? I said, well, I was advised to come here by the police. And he said, well, why? I said, well, because the police are concerned that I've taken too many tablets. And he just looked at me and he said to me, well, is something going on? Do you want to tell me what's happening? But at this point, I was incredibly scared. And I just said, no, I'm okay. You know, I don't really want to talk about it. And then I said to him, are the police still there? Because they had, obviously they had taken me to the hospital, and I assumed that they would still be outside, while I was in the assessment with the doctor. And, he said, well, no, the police don't need to be here because they just, they would have left by now. And I think he thought something was really kind of like just not right. Anyway, he said, you're fine, just go home, you know. So obviously I went out of the hospital. I called a taxi to take me home, and I got in the taxi. And when I went outside to get in the taxi, there was a police car opposite the hospital in the car park, and they were sitting there watching me.
Oh boy, that is freaky.
Oh yeah. And from February, things escalated. It just continued to be bad. Really, it got to the point where, at that time I was actually looking after my mother, she's an elderly person, and I was kind of living with her just because she needs a lot of help, and I had to actually move out of the house that I was living in, and I had to move in with my friend. It was so bad. We had the same thing, you know, just this kind of entourage of white vans, SUV vehicles, that kind of thing. We had neighbors who moved out just a few weeks after this, and were replaced by another neighbor who would stare at me in the street, would follow me around. We had people in the area, again, people who weren't locals, who just seemed to have just arrived there, constantly walking around on mobile phones, backwards and forwards outside the house. If people, obviously people walk dogs. England is a nation of dog lovers, as they say, so there's a lot of dog people there. But would they have to walk the same dog like 5 or 6 times a day outside your house and then stare in your window? It seems very strange to me. And I got to a point where I had to move in with a friend in a different area, and things continued again. Everywhere, sort of like walking down the street, there's a presence of police cars, fire engines, emergency services pretty much everywhere. There's a lot of, I would say, street theatre, a lot of incidents occurring in the area where I was at the time, a lot of fights breaking out. Are you familiar with this kind of thing, Daniel?
Yeah, definitely. I've talked to quite a few people that have experienced similar things. Even myself, I've had little bits here and there. I can only imagine because of this show and what I've been doing. But everybody out there should keep in mind that the police had already pretty much run out of money. They already spent, what'd you say, £1 million on this case.
Yeah.
The police are out of money. It wouldn't be them doing this. It's got to be a higher element.
I think so. I think that, as I say, in my involvement with Reddit, I feel that I was baited and that I was harassed by individuals who were working for Mackenzie Intelligence Services, and they infiltrated Reddit in the same way that they infiltrated a number of other social media websites to give out the details of people that they feel are involved in Corrie's disappearance. And at the same time, I feel like it was what happened to me was a kind of entrapment, because I had previously said some things that weren't particularly complimentary about Mr. McKeague, about him being drunk. that he wasn't a very good representation of a military hero. Perhaps I might have said that, but I also said that I felt that everyone, that there's no reason why he should have more resources directed at his disappearance than any other person who disappears. I felt that there was a certain level of entitlement on behalf of his family. I mean, I did say various things, but I felt that what happened to me was it was almost like revenge. I mean, in a very basic, brutal kind of way. It was like almost like a reprisal for my unpleasant comments about Corrie McKeague.
Yeah, that's very possible. Or it could be that you just came across enough information that you've turned into a living, breathing, smoking gun, because whatever information you have now, it could point to organizations that are higher up the food chain and individuals being involved that don't want to get caught. And I like to think that I'm pretty safe because I'm doing a radio show. I'm bringing on all kinds of people.
I'm sure you are. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not talking about anything that's not already out there on the internet. But if you get any sort of new information or exclusive information, then you become a smoking gun, and then you start to go under the eye or under the radar. If that kind of makes sense.
Yes, I think so. But the thing is with me is I don't think I had information. I certainly didn't have. I mean, the names and addresses and that kind of stuff. That's not information that I saved. I certainly I didn't make screenshots of that stuff because at that point I was already locked out of the Reddit thread, and I didn't. I was very concerned about what was being said because about the Flex stuff, because I thought, well, these people have not been investigated. We don't know if any of this stuff is true, and it's really giving out someone's car license plate and mobile phone number on a public website and suggesting that they're involved in covering up someone's murder is a very serious allegation. And there's some things you can do on social media, some things you can say, and there's some things that you can't. And it was very much beyond anything that's acceptable, even on Reddit. And obviously, those posts did end up being removed. But I didn't have I didn't have information that there would be anything that I could directly use or that I could pass on to, say, the police, because I think the police already have that information anyway. I mean, everything now, after almost over a year after Corrie McKeague's disappearance, all that information will be with the police. They will know the names and addresses and phone numbers of people who are suspects or who could be suspects. And my question would be, why are they doing nothing about it? That's the question. And, you have to ask, I mean, it's almost like a public joke, isn't it, to suggest that someone fell asleep in a rubbish bin, or that they're searching the landfill site because someone was so drunk that they climbed into this bin, and it's a case of misadventure. I mean, it would be hilarious if it wasn't so just so terribly sad and unprofessional and unbelievable. And I think the police seem to think the public are morons. I mean, they must do. So I can understand from the point of view of Corrie McKeague's family that they would do, I think, pretty much anything and everything to pressurize the police to take some action against the individuals that they believe are responsible for his death and his disappearance. So I could, if they would perhaps indirectly through organizations that they have employed with the public's money, if they would then choose to go and leak the details of those people who they think are responsible, in a sense, I can understand why they would do that, because they must have been tremendously frustrated by the inaction of Suffolk police.
Yeah, I definitely think that anytime you're starting threads on a topic or getting more info or coming across info that the police themselves don't have, it's no surprise that you came under the attention of some sort of element. And I can only imagine that you being the thread starter and then you getting locked out of that thread, that's a message.
Yes, yeah. But then we have to say the thread continued with information being posted, and I want to really talk about something that is so important here, and it's the collusion of the British press in the Corrie McKeague story. because as I mentioned about the Chasing Corrie McKeague subreddit that I created that I was locked out of. So I think we had intelligence services working for Corrie McKeague's family on that thread with information that they were passing on. But I also think that they were passing that information on to members of the tabloid press who were also on that subreddit. So there was a collusion, both of them, both of those agencies working together. From the point of view of the press, I mean, it creates, any story is a story, and it was probably fantastic stuff for the press to run the swingers profile and to come out with all of these lurid details about, his sort of sexual swinging lifestyle and his various sexual preferences, which he did actually discuss very explicitly on the website. I won't go into too much detail about those preferences, but it was very explicit. And it was.
Could you give us a hint, maybe?
Well, I mean, obviously, what I can say is that this is something that's kind of that was actually very interesting, because when the screenshots were leaked, it was then discovered that Mr. McKeague had a girlfriend who was pregnant. But not very pregnant. I think she was only about a few months pregnant when he disappeared. Now, Mr. McKeague and his girlfriend, who's called April Oliver, were on the website together as a couple, because obviously swingers have to be a couple. You can't be a single swinger, I don't think. so they were together. So they were swinging as a couple. So they wanted to meet other couples, so that they could swap partners and do whatever they do. To be honest, I can't quite remember everything they do, because the information was a long time ago. But I mean, it was pretty much, your imagination can run riot. It was pretty much the gamut of every sexual activity you could think of. So then the press got hold of the website, but they also got hold of another story, which is that, oh wow, not only is this guy involved with a swinging website, but he's also got a girlfriend who's pregnant, and she's a swinger, and she's involved in this stuff too. And then it just, it became an incredibly kind of sordid story. And I don't know if you actually looked into the situation with Mr. McKeague's girlfriend, Daniel. Do you know anything about that?
Just what I read on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia, it doesn't really give you the details.
Yeah. I think that there is a wiki page for Cory. I think that's written by Corrie's family, but it doesn't go into some of the more alternative stuff that I've read. Mr. McKeague's girlfriend is called April Oliver, and she was, as I say, they were both involved in this Fab Swingers website. And my theory, of course, as I mentioned, is that something occurred in a meeting with people from this website a few weeks before Cory disappeared, and it formed the basis for his disappearance. Now, April Oliver, interestingly, was in America when Cory disappeared. And we don't know how long she had been in America, but we know that as soon as he disappeared, she came back to England, and very quickly, maybe 2 months, 3 months after the disappearance, she then came out to tell the press that she was Cory's girlfriend and she was pregnant. Now, my question was, why did she do that? Why was it necessary for this girl who no one has heard of? No one knew April Oliver existed, and no one knew Corrie McKeague had a girlfriend. Why was it necessary then for her to come out and say, oh yes, well, I'm actually his pregnant girlfriend, and give an interview to the press? Can you think of a reason why she would do that, Daniel?
No, it seems strange that she would be gone when he went missing.
Yes. Well, what I'm suggesting is, when I say that they were both members of a swinging website, now swingers swing together as couples. So whatever he did, she did. Wherever he went, she went. Right. And I think that this event that occurred prior to his disappearance, I think she was possibly present at that event, and I think that she was also in danger. So when Corrie disappeared, she was in America. I think she was hiding out in the States. I think she came back, and I think that she gave the interview to the press so that her name would be public, so that everyone would know April Oliver existed, just in case anything might end up happening to April Oliver.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yes, yeah. So I logically, if he was in danger, I do feel to an extent that she was also in danger, and I think it's like a case of hiding in plain sight, really, isn't it? That you've got, you have you have the attention of the national press, so that it would be very odd if she went missing or if anything happened to her, especially considering that she's pregnant and she has she has quite a lot of public sympathy, shall we say, because of the pregnancy. And I think it was a way of providing security for April Oliver to arrange all this press coverage.
Well, considering all the stuff that happened to you in this strange April Oliver, it seems entirely possible that some faction or some person may have lured or manipulated him into going into that area, because when you think about all the stuff that's happened to you, it seems like it'd be fairly easy for them to lure him out there off of the CCTV cameras.
Well, I have had, part of the stuff that I wrote on Reddit, I wrote quite a lot of what I would describe as satirical commentary about the investigation, and I wasn't the only person. A number of posters were quite critical about Corrie McKeague's mother, Nicola Urquhart, and her determination to make the police spend even more money on his investigation. However, I have kind of over the months sort of come to change my opinion of Mrs. Urquhart slightly. Because I do think when I reflect back, if you actually look at the early press conferences, I just see her as it's very sad. I just see her as a desperate person who really doesn't understand what's happening and who does want help and who feels that she's been thwarted by the police. Or she's been, in some instances, she's been lied to by the police. She's virtually now getting to the point, a couple of months ago, where she did come out and say that they misled her, told her they were doing things that they weren't doing.
Oh wow!
And she is, and bear in mind, she is a police officer, in Scotland.
She's a police officer.
She's a police officer, yeah.
Oh wow! Okay.
It's an amazing story, Daniel. Yeah, so you've got a mother who's a police officer and an uncle who's a retired military intelligence officer. So that it's the whole family is very well connected, shall we say. But getting back to Mrs. Urquhart, she actually said she gave I think it was a couple of months ago when she heard that the police were going to reopen the investigation into Corrie's disappearance, and they were going to search the landfill again. She gave a tour of the locations Corrie visited that night, on the night he disappeared, and she when she talked about the doorway where we assumed he had passed out, he'd bought some food and then gone and sat in the doorway, and we just assumed he was drunk and he passed out and fell asleep. She said that he had actually that wasn't the case, and that he had actually sat in the doorway, stood up and fallen backwards. And she said it was possible he may have injured his head, although it's very hard to know whether that happened. But he then lay motionless for 2 hours, and the CCTV actually records someone who doesn't move, doesn't stir, doesn't sit up, doesn't do anything, just completely motionless for 2 hours in the doorway. And then what she said is he stands up, and it's not a doorway with a revolving door. It's a kind of an open doorway. It's just a basic shop. So he stands up. He wakes up and stands up, And then he spends like 20 minutes walking around in circles trying to find his way out of the doorway.
Whoa.
20 minutes of yeah, and that was something that it had been suggested that previously that the public couldn't see the doorway CCTV footage because it was too distressing, and I just assumed it was distressing because I thought, well, maybe he might have vomited or something, or urinated in public or something like that, but I had no idea that this is actually that was what it showed. And this thing about it's almost like walking around in a circle with seemed to be completely no awareness of where he was, what he was doing, and it's so strange because this doorway, Daniel, it doesn't have a door. It's not like he's trying to open the door; it's an open doorway. So all he would have to do is just literally just walk out in a straight line, but he can't seem to do that. And I thought, what on earth could happen that would cause someone to behave like that? And Nicola Urquhart suggested that she thinks that he might have been drugged or he might have been given some kind of drug. And then where is the last location that he was that night? Flex nightclub. He did actually go into a takeaway shop to buy a pizza after that. So that there's a suggestion that the drugs could have been given to him in Flex nightclub, or something could have been given to him in his food in the pizza shop. But I think the smart money is on Flex nightclub, considering the associations that he had with people there. So was he drugged? I mean, that's an interesting question. And if he was drugged, what kind of implication does that have for his behaviour when he got into the horseshoe? Was he coherent? Did he know what he was doing? Would he be coherent enough to meet a person, to actually keep an arrangement to meet someone there? Because bear in mind, he doesn't have a watch and he doesn't have his phone. So if this was prearranged, how would he know the time?
It seems it could also be that maybe something weird happened to him in the military.
That's something that I was quite interested in, actually. But it has been suggested. But he doesn't have a very he doesn't have a very important role in the military. He's an RAF gunner and a team medic. But I don't know whether he would be someone who would have access to anything at a particularly high level, or who would be, someone who might have information or any kind of, military intelligence. I just don't see it happening. I mean, what do you think?
I was just thinking maybe they might pick somebody that's in a lesser role, like an infantryman, if they wanted to experiment with mind control or something of that nature.
Yes, well, I mean, I have actually, after some of the stuff that's happened to me, I mean, there's a lot more that's happened to me that I haven't discussed with you, because I have had a number of medical problems as well. But yeah, I mean, after the stuff that happened to me, I thought about, I thought about that stuff that she mentioned about walking around in a daze in the doorway, and I thought, what could cause that to happen? So, yeah, I mean, it's something that I did think about, that there might be a possibility of that. But at the same time, it was said that, the full details of his background and his mental health weren't released at the time he disappeared, but it was found out later that he had been visiting a psychological centre, which is run by the RAF for counselling because he was depressed. Well, it was said that he was depressed, or he had some kind of traumatic psychological issues. So again, what caused the depression and trauma? It hasn't been discussed with the public.
Yeah, that even makes me wonder if maybe he just saw something when he was in the military. Maybe he saw something he wasn't supposed to. Yeah, there's so many questions.
Yeah,
wow.
That's possible. Yeah. Well, I mean that's certainly one of the theories that got discussed on Reddit. I mean, the overwhelming feeling on Reddit was that he'd gone absent without leave. He'd gone AWOL. And he didn't want the responsibility of a baby, because his girlfriend was pregnant, or that he wanted to start a new life. There was another suggestion, quite actually after the Fab Swingers website came out. There was a strong suggestion that he was actually gay, and he'd gone to live with another man, which which is kind of ridiculous, because I mean it's the 20th century, so I'm sure he could have just done that anyway. I don't know why he'd have to abscond from the military so he could live with a man, a male gay lover kind of thing. But I mean,
well, the whole thing about the way that his body disappears and it goes along this pathway out to this landfill, it just feels like the perfect way to create a scenario where there's no body.
Yes. So do you think that if it was staged, then he would be able to? So you think that it could have been staged by Corrie himself?
Well, it does seem like there's a possibility that if they wanted to create a scenario where there is no body, either because Corey's alive or because they don't want more hard evidence to come out, that seems like the perfect plot line. Well, his phone disappeared and the data showed it was headed towards the landfill, and it's a huge landfill and they're spending all this money and it's running out. And I only say that because of the hacking and the gang stalking element, which shows you how much money, thought, and how much strategy is going into this whole ordeal.
Yeah. Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think that in other ways, people said that night that he seemed to be psychologically okay that night. Apart from this, which is why I thought it was so strange. This doorway incident, it seemed to be a little bit incongruous with how his behaviour was reported by other people who said he was quite happy. The witnesses who were present that night said he was quite happy and cheerful and quite merry. A little bit drunk perhaps, but not aggressive, not disruptive or anything like that. And then you have this rapid change in behaviour at about 1 o'clock in the morning after he leaves Flex nightclub, and we do know that he was drinking in Flex nightclub as well. So was there something in his drink that could account for that? Yeah,
sure. I think they call that a Mickey.
Yes, indeed. Yes, here as well. Yes, so something was slipped in his drink. I mean, it's possible. But the information that, as I say, I don't really have information. I just have supposition. But it's been suggested that if I can mention a blog. It isn't my blog because I don't actually have a blog on the subject. Well, not yet, but I could possibly start one. But there is a blog out there by someone called Mikey Womble.
Mm-hmm.
And I just refer to it as the Womble blog, and I believe it's actually written by a close relative of Corrie McKeague, who has been gathering intelligence and information on the people that they think are responsible for his disappearance. Now, the Womble blog puts forward a theory that Corrie was involved. It leaves out my suggestion that something happened several weeks before he disappeared, but it suggests that the reason for the lack of motivation on behalf of Suffolk police to actually investigate fully is political. And that there is some connection to the United States Air Force, which has a base in Lakenheath, which is quite close to Hollington, where Corrie was based. So there is a suggestion that night Corrie met with an American serviceman on the night he disappeared, and that person is the person who is really responsible.
Yeah, that sounds very plausible. I definitely think that there's definitely some kind of intelligence or military, because who would be, the white SUVs and all of that stuff and the hacking, that it takes some serious money. It just seems like there's got to be one of these theories that's actually true, and a lot of the other ones are just misdirections and things of that nature to try to muddy the waters and throw people like yourself off.
I saw that it has to be something that could involve, local authorities, something that could involve the police, something that could involve the medical services. I mean, it has to. It's something on an absolutely massive scale, and I think that. I think that Suffolk police have been very. I think they're all scared, to be quite honest. I think that they've been told that they need to back off. That there are certain things that they can't investigate, and also because he disappeared in a public place, he didn't disappear from his RAF base. Then the investigation would be done by the civilian police rather than the military police. So the military themselves, in terms of the RAF, have not been involved in any investigation. And he is considered at the moment to simply be missing, not to be AWOL. So there's been very little, I think, communication between the military and the police, and the police have been kind of left to deal with this themselves, obviously using public money of £1 million in the search. But I'm just wondering if it is like a political issue, whereas there is perhaps a reluctance to upset the United States Air Force, because they are very, very prominent in Surrey. Certainly Lakenheath it's a massive area, and I think that there could certainly be some political issues going on, which would explain why. And if that is the case, then it makes me wonder. Would the McKeague case ever be solved? Is it possible that could ever happen? If it's really at a Home Office government level, yeah.
There certainly seems to be a place where all of these things converge: the gang stalking, the government secrets, the strange sexual things that we hear about going on. Even in this country, a lot of it's coming out from behind the curtain, the strange sexual things, and people will cover it up. And what we're learning from this is that if you scare people enough, if you intimidate them, people won't talk. And it does seem like there is something of that nature going on. It sounds so similar to some of these child pedophile rings and things like that. And when people start to get too close to the facts coming out, suddenly information starts getting jumbled around, and the gang stalking and things of that nature occur. Who's to say what's going on here? It's kind of sad, because I really want to know what happened to Corey.
Well, yes. Well, I mean, I do too. I mean, now on a personal level, I just feel like I'm personally involved in it. And I think that there have been so many twists and turns in the narrative in the story, and it's still. I can't think of another missing person investigation where the police are repeating the same thing 12 months later. That they were repeating last year in terms of like, oh, well, let's search the landfill, and then they stop the search, and then they say, well, let's search the landfill again. It's almost like when they can't find anything else to do, then they just think, oh, well, we'll just search the landfill to appease the public and to perhaps free up some of the pressure that they're receiving from McKeague's family. Because it's a very public disappearance now, and there's been a lot of criticism for Suffolk police, certainly coming from the press as well, the press and the media, and they have to be seen to be taking some kind of action, and the only action they can take is really to go back to the landfill. Now, I have no idea personally whether his body is there or it isn't, but it seems to have been so many searches of, as you say, of this really massive area, and yet there's been nothing at all of any relevance found. There's no traces, no clothes, no personal possessions, just absolutely nothing. I think that the theory goes that staff at Flex nightclub were perhaps responsible for disposing of the body, because there was an arrest in this case. I don't know whether you're familiar with the person who was arrested.
No.
Ah, okay. Well, as I mentioned to you on Reddit, information was leaked about individuals who were implicated, and in March which is just like maybe 2 or 3 weeks after this information was coming out, there was an arrest of I think it's a 26-year-old man called Hayden Stevens, who was a dispatcher for the lorry company which collected the bins. And the suggestion was that Mr. Stevens had falsified or had made a mistake in the weight of the lorry that was collected that night from the horseshoe area. So it was suggested that the weight was actually originally it was a very light weight, which wouldn't have been heavy enough to contain a body. However, in March, it was revealed that the actual weight of the lorry was much heavier. I think it was like, instead of 10 kilos, it was maybe 100 kilos, something like that. I could be wrong on that, but it was obviously it was a very heavy weight, and Mr. Stevens had allegedly made a mistake in writing down the weight. So he was taken into custody and interviewed by the police, and then he was released. But obviously, in light of the new information that the lorry was actually, the bin was heavy enough to contain a body, then it was decided once again that they would search the landfill.
So he had lied and said that the weight was lighter. Is that, do I have that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we don't know whether he lied because he was arrested and then he was released without being prosecuted. So I think the family, McKeague's family, believed that it was a genuine error. It was just a genuine mistake without any intention to deceive on his part. Well, at least that's what that is what they've said publicly. Whether that's privately what they believe, I don't know. But no, he wasn't. Just to be clear, he wasn't prosecuted for that. But that obviously was new information. But interestingly, Hayden Stevens had also been a volunteer police constable.
Oh.
Yeah, which just seems very strange. I mean, and then I thought, I actually just thinking in terms of conspiracy, I just thought, well, it would be very convenient if they say if some new information did come to light, which would lead the police to believe that the body was at the landfill, how would they actually explain a new search? And it's just very convenient to suddenly find, oh, well, actually the lorry records were wrong, so we just have to go and do it again. It's a very easy way of explaining why they're going to initiate a new search.
Or I suppose on the other side of the coin, it could be part of the agenda to cover the whole thing up if suddenly they're saying, oh, there might have been a discrepancy in the weight.
Yes. So do you think that it's possible the body isn't in the landfill?
Well, it seems to me like I know that landfills are huge, and I know that there's tons of stuff in there, but it just seems like you'd eventually come across a bone or a finger or an eyeball or an animal would carry a piece of the body further away and somebody would find it. Something like that. Using dogs or using dogs, you would think that you would find something at some point.
Yes, and I think also something that's quite important is on the night Corrie disappeared, he was wearing very distinctive clothing. He was wearing white jeans and a pink shirt. So we know that that obviously the human body does decompose, but clothing tends to stay around for quite a long time. So you would think if they can identify because they've said that they've managed to identify the dates of items that they found, which correspond roughly to the dates when Corrie disappeared, so that they would know that items that had been deposited at that time. So it should have been, if you like, a batch, the kind of batch that he would be in if he really was taken to the landfill. And despite finding all that relevant material of that time, they still haven't found any traces at all of Corrie McKeague. So no clothing, no shoes, obviously no phone. I mean, it does seem to be coming up a blank, really. And I mean, it's been, well, the most recent search has been about 4 weeks now.
And Cheryl, the fact that you criticized the money that was being spent on it from the beginning, you were potentially highlighting a huge element of the cover-up.
Well, I don't know, because I mean, I think that a number of people were vocal about the money that was being spent. Initially, I mean, I have to say, initially the money wasn't being spent because, not to the extent, because early on in, I would say, kind of like November, December, they were looking for just a missing person. It hadn't quite built up to the extent of well, public attention hadn't focused on it to the extent it has now. So money wasn't being spent, but there was a campaign to raise money from the public to fund the search. And I think that was my issue with it, was that this was all kind of public money that was going to be spent on private searches for Corrie McKeague. And I just wondered if the public, really realized what they were paying for, what they were funding.
So there's even a possibility that the family or the military family elements that were looking into it, they might have just been getting really mad at you.
Well, there is a possibility of that, but the thing is, that when I made a post, my original post didn't have a lot of attention, Daniel. There wasn't. I mean, it blew up on Reddit within about a week to having like 2,000 comments. But initially, I made 2 posts, and the first post had no attention at all. And I think that, the post became searchable through Google. And that's when probably my name would have, well, not my real name, obviously, but my Reddit username would have been quite apparent as the original poster on this 2,000 comment site that was very critical
because
about Corrie
people are
McKeague's
Googling
family.
his name and they're coming to the thread, is what you're saying. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. So it blew up to this, as I say, within a week, about 2,000 comments. But I kind of wonder to an extent about how it blew up so quickly, because again, at that time it didn't have anything like the kind of press attention it has now. It was a very local case. It wasn't a murder investigation. It was just a missing person. It had received coverage on local news, but not national news in England. It certainly hadn't been covered in any other countries. And I just wondered how really it could build up so many posts in such a short space of time. But now I think, in retrospect, that some of those posters were who actually made up the 2,000 comments. I think some of those posters were working for Mackenzie Intelligence Services, and were actually working for McKeague's family.
Well, it's certainly been proven that there's been people that have been paid money to go on forums and blog comments and social media to manipulate public opinion. It's been done by government. It's been done by private elements. You even saw it in our last election over here where the different sides, or at least Hillary Clinton's side, was paying money for protesters to go disrupt the Donald Trump rallies.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, in a sense, I mean, I feel that, but the Mackenzie Intelligence Services are actually being paid by donations from public money. So the public are giving money to the campaign to find Corrie, but they're indirectly paying a bunch of, what should we call them? A bunch of paid posters to go onto Reddit and Facebook as well, and probably web sleuths and probably all the case discussion sites, and redirect the narrative towards people who they believe are suspects. I mean, I'm not sure that the public realizes that that's what they were paying for.
Is anybody else experiencing any of the gang stalking? Anybody involved with the thread, or anybody that you might know?
I couldn't, to be quite honest, I couldn't tell you, Daniel, because I haven't had any involvement with Reddit since my internet was hacked, because I completely backed off everything. Obviously, I was absolutely terrified. I had massive disruption in my life. So I didn't go back I didn't communicate with anyone on Reddit. I tried to explain to people that there'd been a problem with my internet, that I believed that I was being followed, and that it was, my problems were coming from the Reddit thread. And then I just left Reddit completely after that. But I did actually go back to make a post. I think it was probably last month, because I thought, well, eventually I thought, I'm just going to come out and say this, because I've kept quiet about it since February, but I wanted to find out if anyone else had a similar problem, if it had happened to anyone else. And I just posted a question, anyone involved in the McKeague case, have you experienced harassment in any form, offline, not just online? And from what I can tell, no one has experienced that. But whether people who were present in February would still be on Reddit now, if they had the same experience that I had, it's possible that they've just disappeared, like Cory.
Oh yeah, that's a scary thought. Are you in fear for your life at all?
I have actually told people around me what's happened, and I've been accused of being ill. I've been accused of being mentally ill, of being stressed, of being too involved with the internet and all kinds of things. But people are aware of what's happened, and I have told people that I've been followed. I have a recording of what happened to me when I went to the police station. I've been to solicitors. And what I did eventually, I was so stressed, and obviously after experiencing harassment over such a long period of time and becoming physically ill, and ending up having 4 or 5 trips to the emergency ward with a mystery illness which still isn't resolved. I did actually eventually make a couple of videos on YouTube where I tell people who I am, and I tell them what's happened to me, and I have a diary that I kept when all this started in February, of incidents every day, virtually, cars being driven into me, things happening in shops, things being said on buses, just all kinds of stuff. So I wrote it all down in my diary, and I have actually made a couple of, set up a channel where I kind of like explain what's happened, and I document all my experiences, because I think it's very important to do that in case anything should happen to me,
Yeah, absolutely. If anything happens to Cheryl Wilkinson, then you guys out there, you know what happened.
Well, yeah. It's good. And in a sense, I'm just very glad. I'm just very pleased to be able to talk to you as well, so that I can kind of like, I certainly don't want, it's not that I want publicity or really anything like that, because I'm a very private person, but I did want the opportunity to discuss this with someone and tell someone what happened. And as I said, when I had, I was suffering from a lot of stress and harassment, and I went to see a psychologist for counselling, and they told me, they said, well, they listened to me. I said, I want you to know who I am. I want you to listen. I'll tell you my name, and I'll tell you what's happened. And all I want you to do is just listen objectively and non-judgmentally, and tell me what you think. And they listened, and they said, well, she said, well, I think you need a witness. I think you need to express and to put this out there, and just to make people aware that this is what's happened to you, because for such a long time, there was no one I could talk to. And when I did, I wasn't believed, obviously, and there was no one who would listen. And I'm sure that you must know from talking to people, as you have done on your show over a number of years, that it's the same story for most of us, is that we aren't believed when this happens to us.
Yeah, definitely. I've had 2 of my shows pretty much taken out from underneath me by either my internet going out or my electricity going out. And of course I can't prove it, because who's to say it wasn't some other element causing that to happen? But I know what it was. I know what was going on. I know what's going on.
Yeah, it's plausible deniability, isn't it, Daniel? It's that thing that you can, when you know something and you know it as a fact, but you just cannot prove it.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, Cheryl, we are heading to the top of the hour, but I do want to open things up one more time for you. If you'd like to have any last words for my listeners out there, this is your opportunity to go ahead and get on the soapbox one more time, and please follow it up with anything you might want to plug, any sort of social media or anything at all that you would like to plug, even if it's your email or anything like that.
Well, I don't have much of a social media presence, and because of some of the things that happened to me, I actually try to fly under the radar rather than make myself even more of a target. But I do have what I've done is I put some videos on YouTube where I document some of the my personal experiences in terms of my harassment that have been going on since February. And I also talk a little bit more about the McKeague case, because I know people they may not be interested in me, but they might be interested in the disappearance of Corrie McKeague, because it's become a massive story. So what I've done is I've tried to explain the narrative of the story, how it developed on Reddit, how it developed in the press, and also I've tried to talk about the press collusion with the intelligence services and how the intelligence services use Reddit to leak information about people who are considered suspects in that case. So there are 3 or 4 videos. I mean, they're not good. They're not particularly well produced videos, but I've just tried to do things as quickly as I can. I actually produced them on a very basic iPhone. I used Apple Clips. You can't get more basic than that. And it was just really so that anyone who's interested, even if they don't want to listen to me, they can follow some information about the McKeague case. And obviously, as there are any developments, I'll also kind of like update the videos and put some new things up. So to be quite honest, I've forgotten what my YouTube channel is. But I can send you a link, Daniel, and you might want to put a link under in the show notes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's no problem.
Excellent. Well, it's been really good talking to you about. It's been an excellent conversation.
Yeah, of course. And in the future, it might be a good idea if you come across any new information or experience any harassment, we should touch bases and see what you're up to and see if anything else has developed.
Yes, we will do. Well, I'm sure if you follow the investigation, I mean, the search is ongoing now. And I think it's going to go on for another 2 weeks, and then there may be some developments in that. But I think it's just one of those cases that isn't going to go away. So I'm sure that, coming up to the end of this year now, but even as we get into the next year, I'm sure there will be, one way or another, there will be some new developments. So we can always, if you like, maybe come back and talk about those, or we can, if anything interesting happens, I'm considering, I am now at this point considering starting up a blog as well. So if I kind of like push on with that and try to focus and get some work done on that, then maybe at some point later on we can come back and we can talk about the blog and how it relates to the McKeague case.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you got started on a blog or even a radio show like this one, who knows where that could lead.
That would be excellent. Okay, well, look, thank you very much for your time, Daniel. It's been really fun talking to you.
Absolutely, Cheryl. I had a great time. Thank you for being so brave and joining us here and telling everybody your story. I, for one, believe it 100%, and I wish you safety and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much. Okay, you take care, Daniel. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye. And there you have it, folks. That was Cheryl Wilkinson, and we just delved down into our very own End of Days Radio murder mystery, or potential murder mystery, missing person saga. And I can say, for one, that I love a good mystery. My God, was that thrilling. We went 2 hours with that, and we weren't even talking about reptilians or aliens or ghosts or shadow people or anything like that. We were talking about a simple missing persons case, and it was fascinating as hell. I'm quite pleased with that. A little worried for the safety of our guest, of course, but I had a fantastic time. Let's go ahead and take a break, and there's still plenty of show to come. So if you'll stay with me, I'm going to play some music. And for those of you listening to the podcast version, who knows what you'll actually hear by the time I edit everything. But please enjoy the music, and I will be back very soon to continue the show upwards and onwards. We have so much to talk about still. Hello and welcome back to End of Days Radio. I am your host, Daniel, and I am here for you. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I thought it was quite a bit of fun. A little bit different, a little bit the same, but fascinating nonetheless. we will touch bases with Cheryl Wilkinson again. And hopefully we will know by then what the hell happened to Corey, if we ever really truly find out. As you know, everybody, this is the second half of the show. You can call in at 209-348-9810 or add me on Skype. That's NinjaShoe777. This is the time during the show where we talk about all sorts of things. I like to call it the wrap-up news section or the listener roundtable. There's so many different names I've given it, but it's really just the second half of the show. This is when we talk about news, we respond to comments and emails from listeners, and we also talk about different things that are going on and things that are just things. Where should we start? I do like to start with a news story, as many of you know. Let's see here. This is an interesting one. It says, humans have the nuclear power to annihilate Planet X and Earth. Wow. Nibiru believers waiting for Planet X apocalypse have demanded that NASA nukes Nibiru, but a shocking study reveals this could spell the end of the world. So, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the idea I get is that somehow they're saying that we should blow up Nibiru. Why not, right? We don't even really know if it exists, and they're already talking about blowing it up. Right. Why the hell would we want to do that? And I suppose that it would be the end of the world because it would throw off our solar system or something like that. Yeah, that's a little bit ridiculous, to be quite honest. I don't think that we have that proof that Nibiru does exist. I do think there's something out there. There's probably a lot of different things out there. There's a lot of people that have come on this show and talked about Planet X or other sorts of interesting things out there in the solar system. And there's been people that have come on and said that there is no solar system and the Earth is flat and that we live in a dome and on the other side is water. So who's to say what's really out there, but I'll believe it when I see it personally. I am not a skeptic, as you know, but when people are already talking about blowing up a planet that we don't even know exists for sure, I can't help but feel that's a little bit of a waste of time. Now, if you're looking for Nibiru, I totally get that. But why talk about blowing it up? Unless there's hostile aliens on Nibiru, and the only way we can stop them is to blow up their planet. But you would think that if they're that advanced, that wouldn't be possible anyways, right? It'd be like the movie Independence Day, where we fire a nuke at them, and it does jack shit because they have some kind of special force field, right? I'm pretty sure that's what would happen. You know, that Independence Day movie, it's actually more realistic than I previously realized, come to think. Let's move on. Let's see here. This man is about to launch himself and his homemade rocket to prove the Earth is flat. Self-taught rocket builder Mike Hughes plans to fly in his homemade rocket above the Mojave Desert in Southern California on November 25th. Ooh, that's tomorrow. Seeking to prove that a conspiracy of astronauts fabricated the shape of the Earth. A California man intends to launch himself 1,800 feet high on Saturday in a rocket he built from scrap metal. Scrap metal? Assuming the 500 miles per hour mile-long flight through the Mojave Desert does not kill him, Mike Hughes told the Associated Press. I wonder if he knows Matt Hughes. His journey into the atmosphere flat will mark the first phase of his ambitious flat Earth space program. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Wants to prove the Earth is flat. Wow, that is interesting. Hats off to him. The whole flat Earth thing seems to come up quite a bit. I even have a letter from a reader that I'll read in a second who's sick and tired of it. But it seems to just keep coming back, and more people seem to be believing in it. I'm thinking this probably has something to do with YouTube and the sheer amount of flat Earth videos that seem to do a good job proving flat Earth. I've heard the argument that, oh, this is just YouTube learning gone haywire. I think that's what Joe Rogan says. It's YouTube learning gone haywire. Well, if it's that easy to give it... Sorry, let me drink some more coffee. If it's that easy to prove that the Earth is round... if it's that easy to prove that the Earth is flat, that must mean that it's that easy to prove that the Earth is round, right? If these people are dumb that believe in flat Earth, and they're so easily convinced, who's to say that we're not so easily convinced in being taught that the Earth is round? Maybe it's just not that easy to figure out. Maybe we don't know. Maybe we haven't really been up there. Who's to say? And here it is, our first letter of the day. Why not read this one, even though it's pretty stupid? It says, Daniel, I like your show, but Flat Earth is gay and stupid. P.S. Eat a dick. That's from Onslaught. Thank you, Onslaught, for the horrible little bit of fan mail. I don't know why you are still using the word gay as a derogatory slur in 2017, but you're probably watching old South Park episodes, so I'll forgive you for that. I do thank you for saying that you like my show. That's much more important to me than your opinion of Flat Earth. I'm sorry that you think it's stupid, but this show is about alternative ideas, it's about alternative theories, it's about all things supernatural, conspiratorial, paranormal, and fringe. Flat Earth is a very relevant topic these days in those type of circles. And to me, it's not so interesting, the idea that the Earth could be flat. I'm not a Christian that believes that God made a flat Earth with a firmament and all of that. That's not where I'm going with this. I just find it very interesting that human perception and beliefs are so easily formed and so easily manipulated and controlled, and that's really what I'm more interested in rather than the shape of the Earth or if space is real. I'm leaning towards the Earth being round and space being real, maybe because that's what I was taught my whole life. But the other 49% is wondering if indeed the Earth is flat and space is made out of water. Do you think there's space wells out there? That's what I'm wishing for. Like one day you're looking at the sky and you see this big like blue well just floating there above your head out there in the distance, and you're like, what the hell is that? Okay, this is getting stupid. But seriously, I know people start going, oh, he's stupid, he believes in flat Earth. I know that's the reaction, but I don't care what people think. Because do you know what's really stupid? Being judgmental and thinking that you know everything. If you think that you know everything, you think that you're some smart guy or smart gal, then I hate to break it to you, but we're all a bunch of ninnies. We're all stupid as hell. What does a cactus in the desert need to know about infinity? And is it capable of even grasping something of that nature? Of course not. Just like we're not capable of grasping the infinite either. We're just humans. And we're all equally stupid. So don't get full of yourself. Sorry, I was just drinking some more coffee, which makes me smarter as I drink it. Or at least it does if I'm starting off baked off my ass. Oh, the Seahawks. My Seahawks. They've been losing so many of their good players. I am a little worried. We lost Richard Sherman, my favorite player. I actually just bought a Richard Sherman jersey. So I'm quite upset at the fact that he will not be playing for the rest of the season. I'm not sure about those Super Bowl hopes. It's a good opportunity for some young guys to step up and show what they've got. But I can't help but feel a little bit discouraged. Just being honest. I'll always be a fan. I'm not a fair weather fan, or at least I hope I'm not. The absence of any sort of basketball in this area makes me far more likely to watch football simply because there's just less to follow. And the Mariners haven't exactly been really that great the past few years or the past decade or so. So the Seahawks are pretty much all there is. And I'd still watch even if they were complete garbage. And the fact that they're good is pretty cool, given the fact that when I was a kid, they were complete shit and everybody knew it. And it was embarrassing to wear a Seahawks jacket or even be a fan. I remember that's what it was like in elementary school. And you would never see that for a team like the Mets, because no matter how much the Mets suck, their fans will always be their fans and wear their gear. Different teams have different cultures. But this is not a sports show, so let's move on. Also in the news, it looks like one person who we've talked about quite a bit on this program has passed away. Yes, I am talking about none other than the late, great, or not so great, depending on your perspective, Charles Manson, icon of the 1960s, the hippie movement, and one of the first well-known cult leaders. He did not kill anybody. That's what he says anyways. You guys know the story of Charles Manson, right? I'm not going to tell you. You can go on Wikipedia, or you can listen to some of my past shows when I covered that topic. Am I sad that he died? No. He lived to a very ripe old age. I wouldn't even be sad if he died a lot younger, because he was obviously not a very good person, right? But it does make you feel old when you see people pass away. And I do wonder why they couldn't just let the guy walk outside for a couple days before he died. I suppose he didn't deserve it. Another person that passed away was none other than David Cassidy from the Partridge Family. Another icon of those times. I think he would have been a little bit later than Manson. I do listen to his buddy Danny Bonaducci almost every weekday morning here locally in Seattle. I think his show is awesome, and I feel bad that David Cassidy died. That's too bad. I know that he had a daughter that he was a little bit estranged with, who is actually the canary on the show Arrow, Katie Cassidy. I think they had some kind of strained relationship, but I hope they got it patched up before he died. I think she was visiting him or something like that. It's sad when anybody dies, especially people that are well known. I have another letter here. This comes from Don. He says, "Hi Daniel, you are a great interviewer, but you don't ask the hard questions like Megyn Kelly does." From Don. What? Why the hell in a million years would you compare me to Megyn Kelly? What the hell do I have to do with Megyn Kelly? I'm not on fucking NBC or whatever station she's on. I don't do a morning radio interview in your face shit like she does. Why would you even compliment her or compare me to her? What are you, like, obsessed with Megyn Kelly or something? Do you have Megyn Kelly posters on your wall? Does she remind you that it's not so bad, it's not so bad? Why would you compare me with Megyn Kelly? If I'm nothing like Megyn Kelly, then I'm going to pat myself on the back right here. Can you guys hear that? That's me patting myself on the back. Because I do not want to be anything like Megyn Kelly. I think that she is I'm trying not to swear on this show anymore. I'm trying to be a little bit more classy. But to be quite honest with you, I think she's a cunt. I do. I think she is a cunt. I think she's rude. I think she's a bad interviewer. And look, the woman, she posed naked in magazines. And of course there's nothing wrong with that. Of course there isn't. I'm not complaining about that. But don't expect me to take you seriously if you were posing for pictures with your clothes off. I think most people with any decency would think that that's a little shameful. I'm not judging her. I don't really care what she does with her body. I know that there's many that have done much worse and it's not that big of a deal, but I don't take her seriously as an interviewer or as an intellectual or a person with any sort of political opinion. I just don't take her seriously. To me, she's a pretty face wrapped around a giant cunt. That's about it. Don't compare me to Megyn Kelly. unless Megyn Kelly is going to come down here to my studio and take her clothes off in front of me, I don't even want to hear about her. Capiche? I don't like her. I don't. In fact, you know what? She can keep her clothes on. Ooh. Did he just say that? Ooh. Burn. Let's move on. Black Friday is today. Black Friday, where everybody goes absolutely apeshit, trying to score themselves a talking Elmo. You know they don't even have Black Friday anymore, technically. Now it all starts on Thanksgiving. All the ads, they say, come in, we open our doors at 6 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day. And the more and more things switch to the online world with Amazon.com and eBay and things like that, the more desperate these stores seem to be to create that Christmas momentum, to get people to come in and buy things. So they have all kinds of crazy deals and things that are free and things that are cheap. I can't help but think of that Black Friday video on YouTube where thousands of women were rampaging into a Victoria's Secret and fighting like animals over pairs of underwear. Great way to spend your time, right? And most of the women fighting over these underwear were probably far too big to fit in them, which makes the whole thing even more hilarious. Personally, I'm staying home this year. I'm not going to pretend like I've never taken part of it. This laptop that I use for the show, for one aspect of the show, I actually did get on a Black Friday at Best Buy. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm above it all. But personally, I think that generally when you go to the store to spend money, whether it's Christmas presents or whatever, you end up spending money simply to justify your trip. I prefer Amazon. I've got Amazon Prime. I've got an eBay account like everybody does. And I can order things out of state with no sales tax. They get delivered quick enough. It's almost always cheaper. So why would I go into a brick and mortar store anymore unless I needed something specific? There's just no reason to. Like video games. Video games are $60. Do you want to pay $6 tax when you can find the same game online for probably $10 cheaper without the tax and with free shipping? Exactly. That's why companies are going out of business, because they have to pay all their workers, and online they don't. They don't have that type of infrastructure. They don't have to pay workers in a store. They can just drop the price even more. And nobody can compete with that. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining. I love getting my stuff in 2 days from Prime. I absolutely love it. You get your shit so fast. Anything that you want. And they're going after the Walmarts now. They're trying to completely take over, and people are going to start getting their food that way. Can you imagine getting like your Thanksgiving dinner delivered to you by a drone, and it's all cooked up and everything? You just hit a button and this drone flies in and drops off your turkey and your stuffing and all of that. A lot of good feedback about last show. It was the first show that we did in a long time with no guest. We had 0 guests on. Well, the Wolfman did come on for a little bit. And people out there absolutely loved his Art Bell impersonation. There was quite a bit of good feedback. Many people were shocked about how well he did that Art Bell impersonation. They did not. I heard comments like, I've never heard anybody do such a good Art Bell before. So I would say that whole show was a raging success. I would say that it went rather well. There was a period where I was starting to think that maybe I should have a guest on every show. If I'm going to sit down and set everything up, then I should have as much content as possible. But I'm starting to drift away from that idea again. I'm starting to realize that I got to do the show that I want to do. And if that means getting a few less views or anything like that, then so be it. This isn't my day job. I think that it's more important than my day job, but it's not my day job. I don't have to take it that seriously. I should be having fun while I'm getting myself potentially killed, right? I should have fun while I'm pissing off the Illuminati and the powers that be, and the demons, and the reptilians, and possibly even the mantis aliens, and who knows what else. The great old ones. I'm sure that I pissed them off as well. Did you ever pray for a video game console when you were a kid? Did you ever actually like sit there and pray to God for a Nintendo or a Sega Genesis or a Super Nintendo or a Nintendo 64 or a PlayStation? Did you ever pray with all of your heart to get a video game system? And did you get it? And were you thus convinced for the rest of your life that prayer does indeed work? Is that you? I was just thinking the other day of how many times that I prayed for things and it actually worked, and I realized I really haven't prayed all that much. The only times that I can think of where I really prayed was me praying for a video game console. I think there was a time when I was a teenager where I might have got busted by the cops for smoking pot or something like that, and I was praying to get out of it, and I got out of it. I'm sure the cop just had a heart. They did the thing where they take your drugs and they take a picture of you and make you promise not to do it again. Hey, hats off to that cop. That's one cool cop. That's somebody being very cool and doing the right thing, personally. So, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. But I'm just thinking of all the different times when I prayed for anything in my life, and it was mostly related to video games. Maybe I should take it further. Maybe I should pray for a yacht or something like that. Or for world peace, something not so selfish. Maybe we all should. Maybe it'll make a difference. Or maybe it won't. Another thing that I wanted to touch on. It seems that there is another very important news story. I'll go ahead and tell you guys about it. A clown, that's right, a clown working at a haunted barn has been accused of groping women. I'm looking at his picture right now. He's not wearing the makeup, but this guy looks like one scary bastard. He's got those deep set, close together eyes, crazy eyes. The article says, even Pennywise would be ashamed. A real-life creepy clown working at a Wisconsin haunted barn, in quotes, is accused of groping two women, court records show. Do you want me to Donald Trump? Brandon Gorel, also known as Shakes the Clown, allegedly asked the women while they were waiting to enter the haunted barn. The green-haired clown, bearing his pointed razor fangs, made a hand gesture towards their vaginas and made a squeezing motion, the criminal complaint alleges. Damn. The women declined the offer, but Shakes took it upon himself to grab and squeeze one of the women's right breast. Well, I gotta stop laughing. And then squeeze the left breast of her friend, who both felt violated and uncomfortable after the grope. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm only laughing because it's a clown. I'm not a horrible person. Shakes later told cops he'd been asking to do it all night for photos and does not touch women's breasts unless requested to do so. The pervy clown was arrested and charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor sex assault, according to court records. He faces a fine up to $10,000 and 9 months in jail. Wow. Oh, man. What can I even say about that? A clown groping. I guess at least it was full-grown adult women. You got to give him that. At least it's not kids or guys or, you know what I'm saying? At least he's like, even though he's a horrible, violating piece of shit, rapist type of person, at least they're full-grown adult women. You would think that he'd be into worse, given those eyes of his. No, people, just because you're dressed like a clown does not give you the right to grab women's breasts. You know what's really sad, to get serious and to come off like a better person. You know what the fact of the matter is that this type of stuff goes on every level of society, and it goes unreported. And there are a lot of women that this stuff is happening to, and they're just not brave enough, or they are too embarrassed and they don't want to tell anybody. And I know it goes on too. Just look at what's happening in Hollywood. How many years went by before these women said anything? And how much of this crap did these guys in these positions of authority get away with? I kind of wish that there was more reports of women doing this to men coming out, because the guys aren't looking so good here, admittedly. It seems to only be adult female teachers who do things like that to guys. It doesn't really seem to be that there's a whole lot of sexual harassment going on in the other direction. What can I say? I guess guys are pigs. Even though I'm one, it seems to be true on some level. Okay. One thing that I was thinking about the other day, you see, I am quite the fan of comic books, as you know. And I know probably way too much about comic books that I shouldn't even know. If I went on Jeopardy and it was about MMA, pro wrestling, comic books, and conspiracy theories, I would probably slay everybody and be considered the smartest person in the world. That's how much I know about these things that I probably shouldn't even know so much about. Like, all the space in my brain is taken up by this information. But I was wondering, because in the DC comics, DC, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, there's something called a multiverse. So you could have an alternate version of Earth that is called Earth 2 or Earth 3, if this would be Earth 1, and everything's a little bit different in all of these alternate Earths. That's something that they actually talk about in science, right? There's like infinite realities out there where different things happen according to a roll of a die. Like, you could throw the dice and instead of getting a 2, you get a 3. Or instead of going to McDonald's, you go to Burger King. Or instead of having a boy, you have a girl. Things just fall down the pachinko machine differently. It's like the butterfly effect, right? It really makes you wonder if that's true. Is there actually a multiverse going on out there as we speak, and there are infinite other versions of us? And would it be possible somehow through science or technology to actually travel to an alternate Earth and meet your counterpart? Meet somebody that's like you, but maybe your dad did not die. Or maybe you're black instead of white in this reality. Or maybe you're even a female or male version of yourself. Isn't that scary? Are you going to go on a date with yourself? That would be pretty sick, right? And what would happen? What would happen if you had children with your own self? What would they look like? Would they be horrible genetic mutations? But I do have to wonder, is the DC multiverse, is it actually real? And a part of me is thinking, yes, there's an infinite number of realities out there, and some which are so strange that they don't resemble this one at all. There could be complete other realms or other dimensions that aren't even counterparts of this reality, but they're their own entirely different realities. I think that that's something that you will find in a lot of the old esoteric type of texts. I believe that's kind of the basic idea, that there's all these different realms out there. And maybe that would explain a lot of this flat earth stuff. Maybe it's all just different realms. One thing that's hard to tell nowadays is what is technology and what isn't. Like, a lot of times we've had this debate on this show. Are these demonic beings or aliens or these things that people interact with when they're using magic and ritual? Are they external? Are they internal? Are they both? Is it a mixture of both? And also, what is technology and what isn't? All of these paranormal experiences people are having, all these strange things that people are seeing, even things like Sasquatch or Wolfman or Lizardman. I suppose there's always the possibility that it could be some holographic technology or something being done to the brain to make you think that you're seeing certain things. I totally get that. And that's going to be a debate that I suppose goes on forever. Is it us or is it them? The UFO that I just saw, was it aliens from another planet? Or is it just some technology that some super rich people or some super secret high-level black budget military people are keeping for themselves? How could we ever really know? I'd hate to think that we really are in some kind of Matrix or 13th floor scenario, a Dark City scenario, or a Truman Show scenario, and basically our lives, the ones that we're living, are completely fake, and there's a whole different reality behind the scenes, behind the curtain. That's an issue that I've struggled with for quite a while now. And I think more and more people are starting to ask themselves those questions. What exactly the hell is going on? Another thing that I wanted to mention about comic books is I think that, I might have talked about this a little bit before, but I think they were much better when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I remember the comic books being much more violent, much more hardcore. The storylines were very mature and adult, and they were good. And nowadays, I know Disney owns Marvel. I know even DC Comics have probably changed quite a bit. It doesn't seem like they're the same. I remember there's a company called Image Comics and a comic book called Spawn. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar about that. And I remember that those were some of the most badass stories and the most badass characters, and it was just like no fucks given. That was the best way I could describe it. It just doesn't seem like anything like that exists, at least in comic book form these days. I know there's still a lot of great comics, and I know that there's a lot of really good graphic novels and things like that coming out. I totally get that. There's probably no shortage of great stories being told in various forms of media. But comic books, they just aren't the same like they were when I was a kid, and there were comic book shops everywhere. I suppose the same thing is happening to books, bookstores, music stores. You don't see those anymore. But even with comic books, or things like Magic cards and things like that, Pogs, those are really fad-based too. It's like pro wrestling. There's times when it gets really popular and mainstream. Also, another nerdy topic that I wanted to bring up, and please forgive me for talking about so much nerd shit on this episode, but I recently began watching Dragon Ball Super. For those of you that are familiar with the Dragon Ball series, it's very popular, and they were doing it for a while, and then they came out with something called Dragon Ball GT, which a lot of people hated, and that was kind of the end of it, right? Well, they started up again, and it's still going, so there's new Dragon Ball episodes being released now, and it's actually taking the place of Dragon Ball GT. So Dragon Ball GT is getting erased from existence, and Dragon Ball Super is kind of taking its place, and it's much better. It's much better. I'm totally into it. I just started watching, and I'm totally into it. I'm addicted. I'm totally addicted. I love Dragon Ball. Who doesn't? A lot of people are like, what's Dragon Ball? Is that one of those Japanese cartoons? Don't worry, I'm not going to go on too long about this. Oh, wow. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to do the mind-blowing moment of the day. I think that we had multiple mind-blowing moments of the day here. But I think if I had to pick one, I would probably have to go with this whole thing about Corrie McKeague and let me see, which part of this really blew my mind the most? There were so many aha moments. It's really hard to pick just one. But I think, at least for me, once the talk of the gang stalking stuff started, that's when it started to get really freaky. In my mind. That's when I was starting to get like this holy shit feeling. And I think that Cheryl Wilkinson, I think she's safe, personally. I think she's okay. Because if they were going to do something to her, they probably already would have. But I gotta say, I still feel for her. And part of that is because I've been going through a lot of the same stuff myself. I mean, when I have a guest on, I don't like to sit there and talk too much about myself, because it's about them. I don't like to, be one of those douches that tries to make it all about himself. That's not a good interviewer if you're doing that. If you want to know all of my secrets. But seriously, I have had this stuff happen, and I've made it quite clear on this show. I've made it quite clear. I've talked about it quite a bit, and not only have I talked about it, but I've put an open invitation out there. Anybody out there who's experiencing gang stalking or harassment of any kind, you can come on this show. And that's because I know it's not all about me, and I know a lot of people aren't going to believe me when I talk about it. Hell, I don't even want to believe it myself. Who would want to believe in anything like that? That you would be in the middle of something so hostile. But for the sake of all those people out there going through the same thing, and because of the fact that a lot of people don't believe that it's even real, that's why I'm putting it out there. If it's happening to you, come on this show. Help me prove that this is real. Help me prove to the people out there that this is real and this is going on. Because really, when you think about it, it just connects the dots, and it proves that a lot more crazy shit is going on. Because what are they trying to cover up with this gang stalking? Who's doing it? What sort of supernatural potential aspects could it have to it? But personally, I think that I've rambled on long enough. The show's approaching 3 hours. I did not intend to go that long, but my guest last week did not show up. We'll try to schedule him again, but he did not show up, so there was no show last week. And I know that bums you guys out. The last show before last week was friggin' awesome. It was our holiday show. But I know it bums you guys out when you don't get your weekly dose of End of Days Radio. I know that you cry in a corner and you say to yourself, "Oh, Daniel, how could you forsake me this week? You're so lazy." Believe me, people, I'm not lazy. It's just that when a guest doesn't come on, if I don't have a strong show with just me prepared, I'm not going to throw garbage at you. I'm not even going to bother. I'm not going to get into it if I can't give you the full experience. If I have a great show prepared, I'll go on air, whether I have a guest or not. If I feel like I could fill an hour of your life with joy and pleasure and information, then I will. But I'm not going to waste your time if I don't have something special for you. That's just how I operate. That's how I would want to be treated. That's how I want to be treated by the podcasts that I listen to. And I do listen to them, believe me. It just so happens that most of them are about pro wrestling, and most of you could give less than two shits about that particular topic, right? Especially women. You hear guys into pro wrestling, it's like, oh God, does he live in his parents' basement? No, believe me, I just like it. Calm down. Quit being so judgmental. But anyways, I love you guys. You know that. I say that so often, but I just want to say it one more time. And for everything End of Days Radio, go to endofdaysradio.com. If you want to know more about the show, about me, if you want to take part in the forum, if you want to know who I am on Twitter, if you want to know where our Facebook page is at, if you want to donate $5 to the show to help keep the lights on and pay for the servers, then you can go to endofdaysradio.com. it also has a full archive of every End of Days radio show that has ever been done, and it's all free. All that content free from me to you. It's all free. It's always been free. It always will be completely free. All these shows like Coast to Coast, how many commercial breaks are there? And what? It's the exact same people going on that show that come on this show? Or actually better guests, more interesting guests come on this show? And there's more content, less breaks, no commercials? Please, let's not even pretend like this is a competition. That ended a long time ago. I'm in my own league now, baby. You can't compete with this god. Don't even pretend that you can. And we're all gods, by the way. So don't think that I'm saying that I'm special. I'm saying that you need to awaken your inner god, because that's what you are. If we are all God's children, then what does that mean? It means that we are all gods. And that is the last thing that I'm going to say, because what better thing could I say? Go to endofdaysradio.com. Happy holidays. Happy Thanksgiving to you Americans out there. You Americans. You better not be acting like Americanauts. Because you can do anything that you want, regardless of where you're from or where you live or who you are. Join me next time. I will be back, and we will hit it again. We're going to keep smoking this joint until it's all gone. Because that's what we do here. We party hard into the end times. We dig where others are afraid to dig. We go where others are afraid to go. We don't fear Big Brother. We don't fear the Illuminati or the Illuminazi. We don't fear anybody because we know that we are immortal gods and nothing can hurt us unless we let it. That is the truth, whether you choose to believe or you do not. I will see you next time, everybody. I'm Daniel, and this is the End of Days.
Winter's coming.
The king has returned from the broken ruins of Babylon. This is the end of days.